Republic of the Sphere, Terra Firma, New Nystall, May 6th, 3140. What am I supposed to do with all this junk? Rin said, looking over the storage pod that had been delivered to the Akrai's cargo bay. Maybe there's something worthwhile in it? Wasn't your grandfather one of those science nuts? Levitt said, running his hand through his dark hair. Astrophysics. He was obsessed with sorting out how the universe worked, Rin said, nudging a box of notebooks with her booted foot. It ended up causing a lot of damage to his relationships. I guess I can find some time to go through it. Maybe there's some trinkets worth hawking for some cash? Levitt smiled as he shifted a couple of boxes, peering in at all the paperwork, scientific equipment, and Comstar knickknacks. Rin sighed as she recalled the only interaction she had had with her grandfather. She was a small child at the time, and the memory was hazy. She remembered his white beard and a face that was both aged and scarred. It scared her at the time, but that's all she could remember. I'll dig into this later. We need to get moving. The little detour we just did is going to cost us time we don't have, Rin said as she turned and walked out of the cargo bay, heading toward the bridge. Let's go check out our new jump ship. New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, Draconis Combine, Land's End, December 17th, 3151. Most of the content on the drives was either corrupted or useless. However, the astronomical tables, historical data including positioning of planets in the systems and the region would be useful for scientific analysis. It was the kind of stuff that would make astronomers giddy. Rin hoped it would be enough to keep the wolves in the Combine happy enough to cover the costs of refueling and supplying the expedition. Until they received word, the Rabbit's Foot was camped out in the system jump point, taking on supplies that were slowly dwindling the modest savings that Rin had accumulated over the years. The captain sat in the private cabin, filtering through the terabytes of data the techs were able to pull from the drives, hoping to find some info that will help guide their next jumps out into the periphery. She had read some documents, listened to others as she worked out, and was generally nonplussed about what she heard. The technical gibberish was all the normal things you would expect, but Rin really didn't understand why she felt so disappointed to find out exactly what she had expected to find. On the verge of giving up, she stumbled across an audio file with an innocuous name among many others. She opened it and started listening. Down in the cargo bay, Tenica and Vasil were organizing gear and supplies. Barrels of fuel, food, machine oil, and spare parts all needed to be secured before the dropship could make the journey back to the Rabbit's Foot. Techs from the Eulalia and the spaceport mingled and moved crates with forklifts, all while Vasil watched closely. If his steely glare was a laser, it would have cut through armor plate like a knife through butter. "What's up, Vasil?" Tenica asked while looking up at the elemental. Vasil briefly glanced down before going back to watching the laborers like, well, a falcon. As usual, his voice boomed in Tenica's ears when he spoke. "Too many unknown personnel, in and out. This is a security risk." Tenica looked around, seeing that Vasil had a point, though it was probably a bit paranoid to think that anyone would want much to do with their expedition. "I appreciate that you're always on the lookout, though. I'm a little concerned with your blood pressure. Do Jade Falcons ever take a break, or is it always an on sort of thing?" Tenica asked, smirking up at Vasil. Vasil pondered the question as if it weren't rhetorical and responded, "We have our fun from time to time." Tenica noticed the side of his mouth curl up slightly in what might be mistaken for a smirk if you squinted, in low light, in the back of a darkened storage bin. She shook her head, marked off another delivered pallet on her tablet, and said, "I saw that." New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, Draconis Combine, Land's End, Nadir Jump Point, December 17th, 3151. After 36 hours of this nonsense, Lieutenant Cal Levitt was no longer in his normal jovial mood. The technicians and the science team had been pulled off of their usual assignments to deal with a string of communications and navigational issues that had plagued them ever since their visit to the abandoned HPG. During one of the jumps towards Land's End, the jump ship's entire computer system rebooted just minutes before they were to be hurled 23 light-years through space. The hiccup ended up costing an entire day as the crew had been put into sourcing where these erroneous commands were coming from. Finally, after reaching the Land's End jump point, Levitt was able to formulate a plan of action that involved collecting every piece of electronics that contained an operating system and a connection to the ship's network in order to do a mass wipe and fresh install. Dr. Powell from the science team was able to determine there was a software update triggered in several of the systems while they were in the mysterious HPG system. Normally, an older piece of software wouldn't have tried to install over a newer one, but this one did. The ancient code ended up causing a cascade of issues that Levitt was really just now hoping that he had a grasp on, as they waited for the captain and the crew of the Eulalia to return from the station orbiting Land's End. It had been nearly 4 hours since any error had been detected, and it was the longest stretch of time so far. Levitt looked down at the chronometer on the holotable and sighed audibly. It was a habit that he was increasingly starting to mimic from Rin, and several of the deck crew had made comments. "Alright, it's been 4 hours. Let's call it for now, but I want to know immediately if anyone on the ship notices any anomalies. If we end up jumping into the middle of a star, the captain will stay alive just long enough to ring our bell just out of pure spite," Levin said into the ship-wide comm. The crew across the ship felt a wave of relief as the effort to eradicate the malicious software had taken so much time and effort from everyone. In the Mechwarrior cabins, May lay back on her bunk, her straight black hair cascading over the side and dangling in view of Olivia, who was reading a frayed book in her bunk underneath a fellow Mechwarrior. "Well, that was fun," May said as she closed her eyes. Olivia was still feeling the frustration following the business back at the HPG. Anything involving the word of Blake filled her with worry. She hadn't signed up for this job to end up labeled a zealot and hunted down. She had been cold toward the captain on the journey back to Land's End, and was planning to confront Rin about making sure the drives were all destroyed in her return to the Rabbit's Foot. She banished the concern for the moment and tilted her head up towards May's dangling hair. She said, "It's a shame we're on ice up here. We could have torn things up down there on Land's End." "Doubtful. Even this far out from the core, mercs aren't popular with the Combine," May said, with her eyes still closed. "I bet we could find something." Olivia paused as Akif walked into the room, wrapped in a towel returning from a shower. She continued in a joking tone, "Feels like Akif is the only one around here who doesn't have gray hair, and he's got that rotten personality, so that's a wash." Akif chuckled as he slid into a fresh pair of clothes. He retorted, "Your barely restrained desire is noted." Olivia was about to respond with another jab when May leaned over the edge of the bunk, blocking her view of Akif. She smiled and added, "Next time you're in battle, go ahead and let him die. I won't tell." "I heard that," Akif said on his way out of the cabin. New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, Draconis Combine, Land's End, Nadir Jump Point, December 18th, 3151. Lieutenant Levitt watched the holographic representation of the dropship Eulalia slowly approach the Nadir Jump Point and felt some relief. After the last week, it was comforting to know Rin was on her way back, and from the message she'd sent before departing, it seemed the Combine was covering the costs of this resupply. While there was no word from the Wolves, the message seemed positive. Levitt had always supported his friend, and after so many years of planning for this expedition, success felt deserved. Tapping the Holovid table with his finger, he scanned the bridge and tried to recall the first time he had stepped into it so long ago. Rin had bought out his contract for some ludicrous amount of money from the Merc unit he was with at the time, and he had given her endless amounts of ribbing for it. She was a bright-eyed and optimistic captain of a ship she had inherited, and she had a lot to prove. Levitt had been there the whole time. They had been friends for so long that it only made sense that he be there to back her up as she headed out into the periphery, even if he didn't feel the same passion for the mission that she did. Not that anyone really could. "I want to be ready to jump the second the captain is back," Levitt said to the bridge crew, who were already well on their way to making that happen. There was a flurry of yes sirs, and he stopped the tapping.
Captain Rin Barrett, New Explorer Corps, December 10th, 3151. Captain, the transfer of scientific data is deemed acceptable for continuing our arrangement. Included in this message is the code to authorize the transfer of funds. We appreciate your continued discretion in all matters. Mio Sato, Deputy, Bureau of Interstellar Trade, Draconis Combine.
The paper printout of the message from Deputy Sato folded neatly in Rin's hands as she sat in the command chair on the bridge of the Eulalia. She felt even more tired than usual after dealing with all the paperwork needed to pay off station officials and for the supplies now crammed into the cargo hold of the dropship. As easy as it had been to promise Olivia that she would destroy all the drives, the new content that she had discovered was too good to pass up. Rin had listened to the audio files of reports, speeches, and communications dispatches during her off hours, and admittedly had fallen asleep listening to them several times. It was just too fascinating to ignore the glimpse into Comstar's past just as things were starting to fall apart. With a deep sigh, she tapped a link in the armrest of the chair and replayed an audio file she had listened to dozens of times already. Only a unifying threat could bring the true cooperation of the third transfer. A danger so great, no man could stand idly by and allow it to exist in his universe. Terra herself united behind such a threat when the threat of overpopulation and governmental collapse hit its peak. The first Star League brought mankind together to end the age of endless, pointless war. The clans brought us together again, but without a unifying leader. Rin's eyes scanned the bridge, then looked out into the void beyond the thick glass that separated her from the vacuum. The second was the passage of Holy Terra to our true order, after we purged those who could no longer believe. After a long sigh, her eyes feeling heavy, closing them just for a moment to get a few seconds of rest. But as a new order, unifying, rising from the ashes of the old, bringing back the balance we lost when the Camerons fell. If you're enjoying this story and want to support its creation, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, and even share the story with others. The positive comments and feedback have been amazing, and I'm energized to continue with this series. If you are new to the channel, check out this and other stories on the main page, along with painting tutorials and other Battletech nonsense. Now take care, and I will see you next time. Go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.